A young man steps cautiously onto the cracked stone path leading to an old, abandoned house at the edge of town. The building has long been forgotten, its paint peeling, windows covered in layers of dust, and the wooden door sagging on its hinges as if it has not been opened in decades. The air around the house is heavy and cold, carrying an eerie stillness that makes the hairs on his arms stand on end. Every step he takes produces a hollow echo, and the faint creak of the floorboards beneath his feet sounds unnervingly loud in the silence. Shadows from the overgrown trees stretch across the walls, twisting like dark fingers reaching for him. The young man hesitates at the threshold, feeling a sudden chill run down his spine, yet something compels him to move forward. A faint, almost imperceptible whisper seems to drift from inside the house, brushing against his ears, though when he looks around, no one is there. Dust rises in tiny clouds as he pushes the heavy door open, the hinges groaning like a warning. Inside, the house is dark, the faint light filtering through broken windows revealing furniture draped in tattered sheets and the remnants of a life long abandoned. Each step he takes stirs a soft, choking layer of dust, and the scent of mold and decay fills his nostrils. The oppressive silence is broken only by the distant sound of dripping water somewhere deep within, echoing through the empty hallways. The young man feels a strange mixture of curiosity and fear, a sense that the house is alive and watching him, aware of his presence. He takes another step forward, the floorboards groaning beneath his weight, unaware that with each movement, he is crossing further into a place where the past and present blur, and something unseen begins to stir in the shadows, waiting for him. As he ventures deeper into the house, the young man's attention is drawn to a narrow staircase descending into the basement. The steps are worn and uneven, and a faint draft rises from below, carrying a chill that makes him shiver. He hesitates for a moment, listening to the distant creaks of the old house settling, but curiosity pushes him forward. With each step, the darkness grows heavier, swallowing the weak light from the broken windows above. When he reaches the bottom, he notices the basement door, a thick, aged slab of wood with rusty hinges, slightly ajar, almost inviting him in. He reaches out to push it further, but before he can, the door swings violently, slamming shut with a deafening bang that reverberates through the empty house. The sound makes him jump, and for a moment, he feels as though the walls themselves are shaking. Heart racing, he rushes to the door and tries to pull it open, but it won't budge. It is as if some unseen force has gripped it tightly. Panic begins to creep in, and he notices the faint scratch marks along the edge of the door, as though something clawed from the other side. A cold draft seeps through the cracks, carrying a whispery sound that seems to echo from within the darkness. Low, unintelligible, yet full of menace. He pounds on the door, shouting, but the sound is swallowed by the thick, oppressive air of the basement. Every instinct screams at him to leave, yet the door remains stubbornly shut, trapping him in a space that suddenly feels alive with an unseen presence. The faint flicker of light from above no longer reaches him, and he realizes he is completely enclosed, isolated, and entirely at the mercy of whatever lurks in the basement. The house has claimed him, and the young man feels the first icy tendrils of fear curling around his mind, as if warning him that his decision to descend has awakened something that does not intend to let him go. The young man stands frozen in the basement, the sudden slam of the door still ringing in his ears. The darkness around him is thick, almost tangible, pressing against his skin like icy fingers. At first, it seems completely silent, but then he notices a faint, almost imperceptible sound, a soft whisper, like someone murmuring from just beyond his reach. He strains to listen, heart pounding, but the words are unintelligible, sliding through the air like smoke. Shadows begin to flicker at the edges of his vision, moving unnaturally fast, vanishing the moment he tries to focus on them. One moment, a shadow stretches across the corner, then disappears. Another moment, it seems to slink along the ceiling, reaching toward him before retreating into the darkness. Every step he takes causes the shadows to shift, as if the basement itself is alive, watching and responding to him. The whispers grow louder, circling him from all directions, yet no source is visible. His own breathing sounds deafening in the oppressive silence between whispers. He feels the temperature drop further, his breath forming small clouds in front of his face, and a shiver runs down his spine. The shadows now seem to gather closer, almost forming shapes that resemble elongated, faceless figures. Panic rises in his chest. He wants to flee, but the basement door remains shut. The whispers turn into unintelligible chants, low and menacing, vibrating through the walls and floor. Each shadow seems to lean toward him, as if curious or hungry. The young man realizes he is utterly alone, or perhaps not alone at all, and that something unseen is moving just beyond his perception, testing, waiting, and intent on making its presence known. Every instinct screams at him to run, yet the darkness has already begun to claim him, and the whispers grow ever more insistent, echoing promises of fear he cannot yet understand. As the young man stumbles backward from the swirling shadows and murmuring whispers, his eyes catch something on the far wall of the basement. At first, it is barely visible, a faint reddish smear across the old, cracked plaster. But as his gaze sharpens, the smear begins to form letters. The words become clear in the dim light. Others came here before you. His heart jumps, a cold shock running through him. The blood appears fresh, glistening slightly even in the dark, and the smell of iron hits his nose, sharp and metallic. He steps closer, trying to convince himself it is some trick of the light, some residue left from a long-forgotten accident. But the letters seem to writhe, shifting slightly as if alive, pulsing in rhythm with his own rapid heartbeat. Panic coils in his chest, making it difficult to breathe, and he notices that the shadows from earlier seem to lean toward the wall where the message glows faintly, as if bowing to it. The whispers grow louder, almost chanting the warning in a sinister, incomprehensible tone. Every instinct screams at him to run, but the basement door remains stubbornly shut, trapping him with the horrific message. He presses his hands to his face, trying to shake the thought from his mind, yet the words seem to etch themselves deeper into his memory. A cold, invisible pressure presses against his shoulders, and he feels eyes on him from the dark corners, unseen yet unyielding. The message is more than a warning. It is a revelation, a reminder that countless others have entered this place and never returned. Fear becomes tangible, a living thing coiling around him, and he knows that whatever is lurking in the basement has already claimed the spirits of those who came before. Every creak of the floor, every flicker of shadow, every whisper now carries the weight of history, of past terror, and he realizes he may be next. The young man stands frozen in the basement, the blood-red message still fresh in his mind, its words echoing like a curse. Suddenly, the whispers swell, no longer faint or distant, but all around him, coming from the walls, the ceiling, even the floor beneath his feet. Each voice seems to speak in a different tone, some pleading, some mocking, some hissing threats he cannot comprehend. They overlap and intertwine, forming a chorus of voices that burrows into his skull, filling every corner of his mind with dread. The shadows that had been flickering earlier grow bolder, now moving like twisted figures just beyond the edge of his vision, darting and weaving in the periphery. He, as the young man stumbles backward from the swirling shadows and murmuring whispers, his eyes catch something on the far wall of the basement. At first, it is barely visible, a faint reddish smear across the old, cracked plaster, but as his gaze sharpens, the smear begins to form letters. The words become clear in the dim light. Others came here before you. His heart jumps, a cold shock running through him. The blood appears fresh, glistening slightly even in the dark, and the smell of iron hits his nose, sharp and metallic. He steps closer, trying to convince himself it is some trick of the light, some residue left from a long-forgotten accident. But the letters seem to writhe, shifting slightly as if alive, pulsing in rhythm with his own rapid heartbeat. Panic coils in his chest, making it difficult to breathe, and he notices that the shadows from earlier seem to lean toward the wall where the message glows faintly, as if bowing to it. The whispers grow louder, almost chanting the warning in a sinister, incomprehensible tone. Every instinct screams at him to run, but the basement door remains stubbornly shut, trapping him with the horrific message. He presses his hands to his face, trying to shake the thought from his mind, yet the words seem to etch themselves deeper into his memory. A cold, invisible pressure presses against his shoulders, and he feels eyes on him from the dark corners, unseen yet unyielding. The message is more than a warning. It is a revelation, a reminder that countless others have entered this place and never returned. Fear becomes tangible, a living thing coiling around him, and he knows that whatever is lurking in the basement has already claimed the spirits of those who came before. Every creak of the floor, every flicker of shadow, every whisper now carries the weight of history, of past terror, and he realizes he may be next. In panic, but no matter which direction he looks, the darkness seems to stretch endlessly, and the whispers follow him, relentless. His breath comes in short, sharp gasps as fear coils tightly around his chest, squeezing until he feels lightheaded. Every step he takes makes the whispers rise in volume, as if mocking his attempt to escape, and the shadows mimic his movements, closing in gradually. A sudden cold wind swirls through the basement, carrying a scent of decay that turns his stomach, while an unseen force brushes against his neck, leaving goosebumps in its wake. His mind races, searching for a path to safety, but the basement feels infinite, the walls bending and stretching in impossible ways. The whispers now seem to speak directly to him, echoing his own thoughts back in twisted versions, taunting him, warning him that he is already trapped. He drops to his knees, clutching his head, the terror overwhelming all rational thought, realizing that the basement is no longer just a space. It is a living entity, feeding on his fear, aware of every heartbeat, every shiver, every desperate plea. In that suffocating darkness, surrounded by voices and shadows, the young man understands that he may have entered a place from which no one has ever returned. As the young man trembles on his knees, the oppressive darkness pressing in from every corner, a faint glimmer appears across the basement floor. At first, it is barely noticeable, a flicker of warm light that seems almost unnatural against the cold shadows surrounding him. He squints, and the flicker grows, forming into a small, old-fashioned lamp sitting atop a dusty crate he had not noticed before. The lamp's flame dances erratically, casting long, wavering shadows across the cracked walls. Then, from the periphery of the light, a figure slowly emerges, Granny. At first, it is only a silhouette, a hunched shape with exaggerated, sharp angles. But as the lamp steadies, her features become clear. Her face is pale and drawn, almost skeletal, with sunken eyes that glint with a chilling intensity. Her thin, claw-like fingers reach out as though beckoning him closer, and her lips curl into a smile that is more a sneer than a friendly gesture. The young man stumbles backward, heart hammering in his chest, unable to tear his eyes away. Every movement she makes seems unnatural, gliding across the floor rather than walking, her shadow stretching unnaturally along the walls, merging with the other flickering shapes. The whispers that had tormented him grow louder, but now they accompany a new sound, the rasp of her breath, slow, deliberate, and ice-cold. The lamp flickers violently, and for a moment, the basement is plunged back into darkness, only for her figure to appear even closer when the light returns. He realizes, with a sudden spike of terror, that she has been watching him all along, waiting for the moment he descended into her domain. Every instinct screams at him to flee, but the basement door remains sealed, leaving him trapped with her spectral presence. The young man feels the cold of her gaze seep into his bones, the oppressive weight of the basement closing in around him, and he knows that Granny is no longer just a shadow in the dark. She is the embodiment of the fear that has haunted this place for decades. The young man's panic escalates as Granny's spectral figure looms closer, her presence filling every corner of the basement with icy dread. Suddenly, a metallic clatter pierces the thick silence, a series of chains rattling somewhere in the shadows. The sound is irregular at first, like a distant warning, but it grows louder, sharper, echoing off the walls in a deafening chorus. The chains scrape against the floor, against walls, as if moving with a life of their own. Every clink sends vibrations through the floorboards, rattling in his chest, making it hard to distinguish between reality and his racing imagination. As the rattling intensifies, the basement walls, once static and cracked, begin to shift subtly. Cracks widen, plaster flakes fall, and the space seems to contract around him. The young man stumbles backward, pressing against the wall, but it feels like the room itself is conspiring to trap him. He hears the low groan of the house as though it is stretching, bending, reshaping itself to keep him inside. Shadows flicker violently along the moving walls, merging into grotesque shapes, whispering words he cannot understand but can feel, threats, promises of torment. Every movement he makes seems anticipated, mirrored by the shadows or the chains that now snake along the floor, rattling closer to him with a relentless rhythm. The air grows heavier, suffocating, each breath an effort as though the basement is sucking the warmth from his lungs. His eyes dart around, trying to find an escape, but the shifting walls make distances deceptive. Every step forward feels like a step deeper into confinement. He realizes that he is no longer in a fixed room, but in a cage, alive and malevolent, formed by the house itself. The chains clatter violently, brushing against his heels, and the walls press closer still. Panic grips him fully, a freezing terror that threatens to paralyze him as he understands that the basement, Granny, and the shadows are now united in a single purpose: to ensure he never leaves. Heart pounding and lungs burning, the young man scrambles to his feet, desperate to escape the suffocating basement. Every instinct screams at him to flee, but the moment he turns toward the staircase, his eyes widen in horror. The steps that had led him down now seem impossibly long, stretching into an endless void of shadow, and the door at the top appears warped, sealed shut, as if the house itself has fused it into the wall. He rushes to another corner, hoping for a window or a side exit, only to find broken panes boarded up with thick, rotting wood, impenetrable and unyielding. Panic claws at his mind as he pounds fists against the walls and doors, but the house responds only with silence. Or worse, the faint echo of laughter, low and mocking, drifting from the shadows. Every corridor seems to twist unnaturally, turning back on itself, leaving him disoriented, unable to find a path forward. The chains continue their relentless clatter, sliding along the floor and walls, as if circling him, herding him deeper into the center of the basement. Shadows stretch along the walls, looming like specters, closing in with each frantic step he takes. He feels the oppressive air thickening, as though the basement is breathing in tandem with him, matching his panic, tightening its hold. Every possible escape is blocked, not by physical barriers alone, but by an unseen force that twists reality, making the familiar unfamiliar, the attainable unreachable. The whispers grow louder, now a chorus surrounding him, chanting his name in twisted tones that echo directly inside his skull. His vision blurs with fear, sweat drips down his forehead, and the cold from Granny's gaze presses against his skin like ice. He realizes that no matter where he runs, no matter how fast, the basement has already trapped him completely. He is not merely enclosed. He is ensnared in a place that reshapes itself around his fear, ensuring that every attempt to flee only leads him deeper into the clutches of the darkness waiting for him. Breath ragged and heart hammering, the young man stumbles backward, searching desperately for some sign of escape. That's when he notices it, a cracked, grimy mirror leaning against the far wall, half hidden in the shadows. He wipes a layer of dust from its surface, hoping to catch even the faintest glimmer of himself, some reassurance that he still exists, that he is real. But the moment his eyes meet the glass, his blood runs cold. His reflection is gone. Instead, the mirror shows only Granny, her ghostly, twisted figure, hunched and gliding toward him, her hollow eyes fixed and unblinking. He blinks, shakes his head, and steps closer, convinced it is a trick of the light. Yet no matter the angle, her reflection dominates every pane, every shard of glass, multiplying endlessly. The whispers escalate, merging with a low, rasping laugh that seems to echo from the mirror itself. Every flicker of movement in the shadows behind him is mirrored in her reflection, her spectral hand reaching out toward him, though the room around him remains empty. He spins, desperate to see his own reflection, but every mirror, every polished surface, every gleaming shard reflects only Granny's face, her expression twisting into a sneer, a mockery of his terror. The young man feels an invisible weight pressing on his chest, as if the mirrors themselves are alive, closing in on him, trapping him in a web of endless reflections. His voice catches in his throat as he whispers for help, but the sound disappears into the shadows. Panic becomes suffocating, a living, pulsing force, and the mirrors show him what he fears most, that he has already ceased to exist in this place. Only Granny remains, in every reflective surface, watching, waiting, taunting, and he realizes with a bone-chilling clarity that he is now entirely at her mercy. No escape, no reflection of himself, only her, and the basement stretching infinitely, consuming every corner of his reality. Driven by sheer desperation, the young man gathers every ounce of strength left in his trembling body and makes one last, frantic dash toward the faint glimmer of light he thinks he sees at the far end of the basement. Each step feels heavier than the last, as if the air itself has thickened into a viscous, resisting force. The walls seem to stretch and twist around him, elongating the distance, making the exit appear just out of reach. The rattling chains grow louder, the shadows stretch further, and the whispers swell into an unbearable crescendo, pressing directly against his mind. His breath comes in jagged gasps, sweat stinging his eyes, and fear burning like fire through his veins. But still, he pushes forward. And then, just as he reaches the threshold where the basement seems to promise freedom, time seems to slow. A chilling silence falls over the chaos, and his heart drops as he notices movement directly ahead. There, blocking his path, is Granny, her figure impossibly still, yet radiating a terrifying presence that freezes him in place. Her eyes, hollow and unblinking, bore into his soul, and her smile twists into something malevolent, cruel, and inevitable. He realizes, with a sickening clarity, that the exit was never meant for him, that every desperate step has led him directly into her grasp. The shadows ripple around her, responding to her presence, and the basement itself seems to breathe with her, alive and conscious of his terror. He stumbles backward, but the space behind him is just as impossible, the walls pressing in, the chains rattling closer. The whispers now form words, low and hissing. You belong here, forever. His knees give way, and as his vision begins to darken with panic and exhaustion, Granny's hand reaches toward him. The young man is trapped, utterly and completely, in a nightmare that has no escape, no mercy, and no end. In that moment, he understands the horrifying truth. The basement, the house, and Granny herself are eternal predators, and he is the newest prey, doomed to become yet another story written in blood, shadows, and fear.